all know preparing for a baby is overwhelming. The doctor's appointments, nursery setup, and trying to navigate the millions of must-have baby products that are out there. I am thrilled to tell you about this week's sponsor, Simply Magnetic Me, because it was created by two parents who are on a mission to make parenting and dressing easier. And who doesn't want that? Simply Magnetic Me offers GOTS certified 100% organic cotton essentials like footies, coveralls, and bodysuits, all featuring safety-tested magnetic closures. No fumbling with tiny snaps or buttons during those middle-of-the-night diaper changes. You can get baby dressed quickly so everyone can get back to sleep. You may have heard of Magnetic Me. Simply is their new sister brand that offers the same beloved magnetic closures at a more affordable price. You can create a custom bundle on their website, combining the prints, styles, and sizes that you want with outfits as low as $15. The more outfits that are in your cart, the more you save. And trust me, babies need a lot of outfits. It's true. Say no to snaps and head to simplymagneticme.com to stock up on no fuss essentials and use code MLN20 for 20% off your order. You're listening to the Mommy Labor Nurse podcast, where you'll gain the tools, knowledge, and confidence you need to erase the unknowns, feel in control, and have an even better birth, no matter how you deliver. My name is Liesl Teen, mom of two, practicing labor and delivery nurse, and your host. From over 8 years and counting of working at the bedside, I know that knowledge is the key to an even better birth. So tune in each week to learn about all things pregnancy, birth, and postpartum from me, a labor and delivery nurse that's seen it all. And now let's get into this week's episode. This week on the Mommy Labor Nurse podcast, I have a birth story for you guys, and it is just one of those movie type birth stories. Like, you're going to get all of the feels by the end of this one, because I remember when I was recording it, I got all the feels. So I have Andrea on today with me, and we are going to be talking about her birth. She had a really, really incredible natural birth, and she goes into detail about this. And this is the episode that you want to listen to maybe like right before you give birth, or I don't know, like I'm just envisioning myself full term pregnant and wanting to be done, and also wanting to give birth without an epidural, and listening to a really positive natural birth story would just really, really brighten my day. So that's what I think of when I think of this episode. So I'm not going to give you guys any details other than that this was just a really incredible natural birth story. So if you're interested in natural birth, stay tuned. Keep listening. I got a really, really, really good one in store for you. Hi, Andrea. Thank you so much for being here today. Welcome to the Mommy Labor Nurse podcast.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here and share my story.
Yeah, I love doing birth stories. I haven't recorded one with someone in quite a bit, so I'm excited. This is the first thing. I just came up to my office. This is my first thing that I'm doing today, so let's start off the day with a bang. I love it.
Perfect.
So can you start by telling our listeners a little bit about yourself, your family, where you're from, anything you want to share?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, my name is Andrea Gosser. I live in the La Crosse, Wisconsin area with my husband, Cody, and our now 3.5-month-old daughter, Lorelei. And my husband and I are actually both photographers. So we do wedding photography together. And he also works full-time outside of that.
Oh, gosh.
And then I started photographing small business branding as well within the last couple of years. And so since he works from outside of the home too, we've kind of started to like ease back on especially wedding photography now that we have our daughter.
Yeah.
And we're trying to just book less events and spend more time as a family. So yeah, kind of a stay-at-home mom right now, but slowly getting back into some of that photography.
Yeah, that's what's nice about photography too, is it's very, you can take what you want to take and leave what you want to leave on the table. My dad was actually a wedding photographer growing.
Okay.
So I know that life, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. it's a commitment.
It is. It is. Yeah. And just being, gone on weekends, on Saturdays and stuff, it is definitely a commitment. But yeah. But also, I mean, I know my dad is very, very, he was always very passionate. He's still very passionate about photography.
Yeah.
So it's like just, it brings that out in you,
Right, exactly. And it's been super fun that we got to do it, together as a married couple. Yeah. We always love to encourage our couples. We're like, marriage can be amazing. We want to be a really encouraging and supportive voice for them. So it's been a really special journey so far. So yeah, we're just glad we're able to keep doing it, but just a little bit less.
A little less. Yeah, no, I gotcha. Cool. All right. Well, let's start from the beginning. Tell me I usually have people kind of start back. If you had any infertility struggles and you're willing to share that, or if you had any losses or anything like that, tell me about getting pregnant, and then we'll talk about your pregnancy, and then we can go into your birth story.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, I always knew that I wanted to be a mother. Both my parents were teachers, and I actually did teach for a while as well before getting into full-time photography. And I just really enjoyed being with kids. And so I feel like way before I even knew I was ready to start planning for a family, I was already following like social media accounts and just learning about pregnancy and motherhood. Was always very curious about it. And so I feel that throughout, a few years after we had gotten married, I had just started learning more and more. And that's kind of where this desire for a natural birth came from. I think I just saw so many stories that were really empowering to me that kind of put that question in my head, like maybe this could be possible for me too. Yeah. And so after we got married, then I did some more research as well into natural family planning. And so I'd been on birth control like since high school. I feel like it's more and more common these days that you get to a certain age as a woman and they're just like, here you go, this is the answer to your problems. And I had never really thought about it very much. And so I started having some negative side effects and just learning more about it, and really wanted to be more in control of my body and what was happening. And so, yeah, a few years before we even talked about having a family, I read the book, Taking Charge of Your Own Fertility. I don't know if you've heard of that before.
I haven't read it, but yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. I think that it was just a really incredible resource for me, even if you don't want to get off birth control, or you still want to continue using some sort of contraception like that. It was just so helpful because there's so much that we are not taught about how our cycles work, what's happening in our bodies throughout each month. And so that kind of started a really cool journey of just learning more about how we are created and the way that our cycle works naturally. And so that continued for a few years, and I was really able to get in tune with my own cycle and know exactly when I was ovulating. And so my husband and I used that method successfully for a few years to not get pregnant. And then when we were ready last spring, we had the beginning of last year, I kind of started talking like, okay, we've been married for a while. Like, what do we think? And we knew we wanted to start a family and kind of decided this would be the right time. And so because I had been so in tune, with my own cycle, I was pretty confident. I knew when I was ovulating, but I think it's a pretty common experience too, that we as women take that responsibility and that fear of like, can I get pregnant? Will this work? There was that like stress at the beginning, and we were super blessed. We got pregnant the second try. So I feel like, it was a really big blessing for me, because I did have some of that fear, just that we would experience a longer period of time. And it was kind of funny because we had so many weddings booked for that year. My husband had to like put an Excel sheet together of like, if we get like pregnant in this month, like it'll be fine, like we can do this. And it just like, there was more planning to it than probably other people go through. But we were like, if we can try for these amount of months and then we need to take a break. So it was just a blessing that we were able to get pregnant at the beginning. So we didn't have to like really change our schedules at all.
That is so funny. I know. I remember with Walter, I got pregnant. Was it the first now I'm like, I don't remember. I think it was like the first or second month. And I totally resonate with that because I had never like tried to get pregnant before. Right.
Yeah.
But like, I had never had any really doubts of, I don't have any PCOS. I don't have any of these other issues, but you're like, I'm already on those the forums of like people talking about, I'm tracking my cycle and I'm doing the strips and I'm this and that. And I'm like, oh, I'm thinking, but it's true. It's totally true. You start them from the beginning. Some people are like that.
Yeah, definitely. So it was around Easter of last year that I kind of started to have the first sense of like, I might be pregnant.
Yeah.
And I think those weeks afterwards too, it's really challenging because you want to test right away, but you know that if you test too early, you might not get the right response. Yep. And so that was kind of challenging. I think we did still test pretty early after my missed period, but my husband leaves for his full-time job at like 5:30 in the morning. I was so eager. I was like, I'm going to wake up with you. So we woke up at like 5 in the morning and I took the test, and it was actually a really funny memory because the second that I, finished doing the deed on it, I moved it over to the counter to pass it to him to set down for whatever the 5 minutes is. And as I was passing it to him, I could see it was positive immediately.
Oh, wow.
There was no wait time. And I was thinking, I just want to give it a minute, because we're supposed to wait the few minutes. And I was just probably processing it all in my head too. And so I passed it to him to put it on the counter. And I could see that when he grabbed it from me, he also saw that it was positive, and his eyes just got so wide in shock. And it was funny because we both kind of pretended like we hadn't seen it for a few minutes. And then it was like, okay, we both have seen it.
That's so funny.
It's positive.
That's so funny.
Yeah, I didn't expect that. It was immediate. And so we had waited enough time.
Yeah, I know. It's almost like you're like, okay, I know I have to wait the time. So you're like thinking in your head, wait, is it going to go away? I don't want to make sure it like doesn't go away.
Exactly. So we have some fun, blurry, really early morning photos of us that we took just to remember that day.
That's so sweet. That is so sweet. Okay, so let's get into your pregnancy. Did you have a horrible pregnancy? Did you have or did you have like one of those sunshine unicorn, I love being pregnant pregnancies?
Yep. I think the first trimester probably was the most difficult for me. I think that was pretty common. Luckily, I didn't deal with any really severe nausea or throwing up or anything like that. I experienced severe exhaustion, which I didn't know was, very common. But the more that I talked to people, the more that they shared the same feeling. Yep. And so I didn't expect that at all. And I am a pretty motivated and active person. And so I just could not believe how tired I was. And I was blessed to be able to be working from home, working for myself, so I could really set my own schedule. But it did happen at a really busy time in our business where we were preparing with our couples for their weddings in the summer. And then I was doing a lot of small business photography as well. And it just was so hard. Like I would answer 2 emails and then need a nap. Yeah. That's how tired I felt, just mentally and physically. And I had been pretty active, working out before then. And so it just felt like really challenging to go from, this excitement, okay, we're pregnant, and then just, oh my gosh, I have no energy to do anything. Yep. And I don't know, your personality type or what, but I definitely find my worth in what I can do in a day, and the tasks
your
that
love
I can
language
check
is
on my to-do list,
acts of service or what. Yeah.
And so it was very challenging to give myself grace in that time period and to realize I'm doing what I need to do for my body, for my baby, just by resting here. And so that was challenging. I would say the other really challenging thing about the first trimester too is just the fact that not everyone knows yet. Yep. And you're feeling this tiredness. I would see my friends and just have to say, oh yeah, I've been really busy. That's why I'm so tired. Right. And you just want to share that. And some people feel comfortable sharing right away. We wanted to wait until we heard the heartbeat, and just had some more confirmation. And so we ended up telling my parents and our best friends before we heard the heartbeat, because it was like, we need some people in our court with support. Yes, exactly. And so that time period, before we had heard the heartbeat as well was more anxiety inducing than I thought it would be.
Mm.
Cause, you don't feel the baby move. If you aren't having super severe like symptoms or anything like that, you can kind of question every single day. Is this real? Is this
Yeah.
happening? Am I okay? Is the baby okay? And then people don't know. So yeah, it was kind of isolating that first trimester. And so that was probably the most challenging trimester for me. We're really happy with our care that we got at the hospital. We worked with a certified nurse midwife team. So that was really awesome and something I didn't know much about until
Yeah.
we were receiving care. But yeah, it aligned really well with kind of my desires for birth and the care that I wanted. But in that first trimester, they're pretty hands off and they're like, you're pregnant. We believe that. We're not going to check. And so we didn't hear the heartbeat until about week 12. And that felt like a very long time
Yeah.
to wait. And yeah, just hearing other people's experiences where they went in right away and were able to get that confirmation. I was really eager to hear that heartbeat. So when we finally did, it was just a really
Mm.
exciting and happy moment. And yeah, made things feel much more real.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how the first trimester went. I guess like near the end of that, Cody and I both have June birthdays. So
Mm.
we had a combined birthday party and we told our friends at that birthday
Aw.
party and we were outside on our deck. And that's a really sweet memory because we have footage from our like home security camera of the audio of our friends hearing that we were pregnant. And it's
Aw.
just like, sounds like, crazy event happened. Everybody started screaming. And so
Aw.
that's very sweet to look back on.
Yeah, that is so sweet. Oh, no, I love that. Well, first trimester, I would say is, third trimester is tough because you're big. But I mean, for me, definitely with both of mine, it was the worst trimester of all of them.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I resonate with the tiredness too. And I feel like that's super crazy common, but it's not talked about as much as the throwing up and the morning
Right.
sickness and feeling like crap. But yeah, you're so exhausted because your body is like on overdrive almost, making this baby.
Right.
So the exhaustion can kind of just take you really off guard if you're not prepared for it, for sure.
Definitely.
Interested in the possibility of an unmedicated birth? Make sure to grab my totally free natural birth prep pack. It's full of free printable resources to help you start preparing for your even better birth. Inside the pack, you'll get access to our super popular hospital bag checklist so that you know your hospital bag is stocked with everything you need for the big day. You'll get traditional and visual birth plan templates to help you think through all the questions related to your birth and gain the sense of control that you deserve. You'll also get exclusive MLN birth affirmation cards, one of my favorite ways to tap into that mental strength during your natural birth. And you'll also get a third trimester to-do list to feel completely at ease heading into labor, knowing you've checked every box. To grab all of this for free, simply head on over to mommylabornurse.com/natural pack. That's mommylabornurse.com/natural pack to access your free natural birth prep pack today. So let's go into a little bit later into your pregnancy. How, anything eventful or?
Yeah. So in second trimester, definitely got some of that energy back.
Good.
I started to work out consistently using a program called Expecting and Empowered, which is created.
I love that.
Yeah. So they just are amazing. I was also following them for years before I was pregnant and did some of their workouts too before I was pregnant. But I knew that I really wanted to be consistent with that because I had just heard so many people's good experiences with it. And I liked, it was very clear about, what is safe for you to do while you're pregnant. And I was able to do all the workouts at home. So I started doing that consistently throughout the second trimester and was able to continue until like basically the week before she was born, which was awesome. And so, definitely had more energy. I really loved being pregnant. I think for the second and third trimester, I loved seeing, my belly grow, and it just was an exciting time. We found out that we were having a girl, which was what we had hoped for. So that was really sweet. Yeah, I did end up getting COVID around 20 weeks. And that was scary because at that time, they were still kind of looking at the research of COVID and pregnancy and the effects that it can have. And there
Yeah.
were some concerns about the placenta deteriorating, at some point.
Yeah.
And so they did have to talk with me about having an induction, if I reached a certain week. And that to me was something that I wanted to avoid at all costs because I really had this desire for a natural birth and just wanted to let my body be able to do what it needed to do
Yeah.
in the time frame that it needed to. And yeah, so that was challenging. I had to miss a wedding as well. And so thankfully Cody didn't get it. He was able to shoot that wedding for us.
Good.
But yeah, having a week too, just isolated while pregnant, just in the bedroom was
Yeah.
like not very fun. And so
Yeah.
thankfully, by the time I reached the end of the third trimester, they had seen that COVID in pregnancy wasn't having as many of the effects that they had thought it might. And so there was no need for induction. So that was really amazing. I was very
Good.
happy that, that didn't have to happen. In my third trimester, I would say biggest symptom was heartburn that started at that time and definitely got worse as I got closer to birth. But she was super active in the womb and was always like moving around and very active at night, which kept me up sometimes, but was very sweet.
Yeah, they all do
Exactly.
that.
Yep. Yeah. I just tried to remember this is reassuring, telling me that she's okay. And yeah. And then the other eventful things I would say for the third trimester was we decided to hire a doula. And so she was someone that we knew from college. So that helped out as well. It was someone that we had known a little personally.
Cool.
So we had some meetings with her and she came over to the house and we talked over our birth preferences and kind of how she could support us, what we could be doing to start preparing and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, then like getting into that like week or so before she was born, I don't think I mentioned her due date was Christmas Day. And so that was kind of exciting for us. I love Christmas. And so we were just excited to see, would she come on that day? Would she come before, after? I really had a feeling that she would come before and was trying to mentally prepare myself that she probably wouldn't. But when her due date came and passed, I was pretty disappointed. I'm sure everyone feels that way, right? You're like, okay, I'm ready. Thankfully, I wasn't very uncomfortable. I was big, but I think because I was able to stay pretty active, I didn't have many like third trimester pains or things like that. But I was doing everything imaginable probably for the last few weeks. Like I'm doing a mile circuit every day. I'm doing curb walking. We're getting out for walks, and it's like December, and we're out in like snow pants and everything in Wisconsin. And I'm like, we're getting this baby out. Yeah. And I ended up having an appointment the day after her due date, and I was 1 centimeter dilated. And I was like, let's give me a membrane sweep. Like, let's try this. And so, we had that done. And that day I did experience some cramping and some bleeding, but nothing more than that. And then the next day I woke up and it's kind of wild. I journaled that I didn't even feel pregnant anymore. I was like, what is happening right now?
Weird.
Like, I just didn't feel any symptom whatsoever. And I'm like, is this baby ever going to come out? But it was just a few days later that I did end up experiencing some contractions, and then we'll get into her birth story too.
Yeah. I'm curious what you mean by you didn't feel pregnant anymore. It was
like, I felt totally energetic. Like, I don't know. It was so strange. Like, I just felt like my normal self. And I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it was such a mental game because I thought, like, what's the deal? I just had this membrane sweep. I'm supposed to like start feeling more symptoms, and it feels like no symptoms at all.
Yeah, that makes sense, because one of the things that definitely happens for a lot of people before they go into labor is they do kind of get this burst of energy out of nowhere. So I'm glad you said it like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yep. It was definitely confusing. But it ended up just being a day and a half later than that I started experiencing labor. Yeah. So that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Well, let's get into it. Did you wake up in the middle of the night? Did you start during the day?
Yeah. I had been praying that I would start having contractions, like either, in the really late night or early morning. I just have heard so many stories, of women that you labor pretty much for days,
They're up. Yeah.
and so I thought, oh man, if I could just get some hours of sleep before I have to have this baby, that would be incredible. And yeah, thankfully that's how it worked. So around 2:30 in the
Great.
morning, December 30th, I started having some inconsistent cramping. So it woke me up. I was just kind of feeling it. And yeah, definitely felt more like those period cramps. And so I was able to go back to sleep, which was amazing. But then by around 7 in the morning, they were definitely more consistent. So I could tell they were coming, more of a rhythm and definitely more painful. So I was still having to kind of breathe through them and everything. And in my head, I was thinking, I'm so far away from having this baby. Like, these are just cramps, it's not even a contraction yet. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know why I had that thought. I think maybe I was just trying to prepare myself for not having her very soon. But we ended up
Hmm.
texting Megan, our doula, around 7, and she was asking me some more questions about the cramps, and I was explaining them more to her. And she's like, these sound like contractions. Like, have you started tracking them? And we were like, no. So we started tracking them. And then around that time as well, I did lose some of my mucus plug. And so around 7:30, the contractions were lasting about 40 seconds each, and they were coming like every 3 minutes. Yeah.
Okay.
And,
Yeah, that's something.
and so we decided that we would have our doula come over to the house, and she would just watch a few contractions and kind of see what I looked like. And then we can kind of go from there and decide what to do. And so before she came, I had lost more of my mucus plug, and it was more of that like red pinkish blood. And so
Yeah.
yeah, I kind of knew then, like, okay, I think this is happening. Right. And so
Yep.
about 9 a.m., Megan came over to the house. She watched a few contractions and kind of gave us the rundown of like, here's the deal. This could keep going on for a day. You never know. And so
Hmm.
keep doing what you're doing, rest as much as you can, and call me when you start feeling like, things are starting to intensify. You aren't sure what to
Hmm.
do to cope, that kind of a deal. And we had
Yeah.
explained to her one of our big preferences with my birth was that we could stay at home as long as possible. Yeah, I was very glad to have a hospital birth, and I can share more about that later too. But I knew that I didn't want to be at the hospital for like a long,
For
yeah,
this a
yes, yeah,
long time. Yeah. Yeah.
and knew that I would feel a lot more comfortable just laboring at home for as long as I could. And so, yeah, I was really glad for her encouragement with that. And she suggested, maybe take a shower, just do whatever you can to rest. And so I did take a shower, probably stayed in there for like 30 minutes because it just felt so good. And the
Yeah.
contractions still were coming pretty consistently every 3 minutes and started to last a little bit longer, like 45 seconds to a minute. And
Hmm.
they were intensifying, but I could still breathe through them, talk through them. And I think it just felt so good to be in the shower that I just didn't really want to leave.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was doing a lot of deep breathing through the contractions. And eventually, after I got out of the shower, was doing a lot of movement. I think I was experiencing some back labor. I had to bend over with
Mm.
every contraction and kind of just be draped over like the exercise ball or a couch. And
Hmm.
my husband was doing some hip squeezes, and sometimes that helped, sometimes it didn't. I don't know. We hadn't really practiced
Hmm.
beforehand. So I feel like sometimes we probably just weren't
Hmm.
lined up just right. But yeah, it was good to be at home. And probably around that time, I think I just started to be so focused that I kind of lost all concept of time in general. And so thankfully for me, my labor, it kind of just flowed really nicely. And I didn't feel like anything was like
Good.
taking forever. I just was able to kind of experience it
Good.
as it came. And so around 10:30 or 11, so just like a few hours after our doula had been there, things were getting like, we could tell things were intensifying and getting worse. And
Yeah.
so we called the hospital to let them know that I was in labor. They were very relaxed and kind of, I don't know, I think I expected them to be more like, you should be in here right now. But they were very much just like,
Yeah.
come,
Like,
yeah,
come on, get here.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
They were like, okay, well, come when it's starting to intensify a little more. The contractions are coming closer, lasting longer. And so we asked Megan to come back to the house. And I think she was really trying to honor our desire to stay at home as long as possible. Whereas Cody and I, as first time parents, I think we probably would have been like, let's go to the hospital. I think in our brains at that point, we're like, okay, this is happening. We should probably get to the hospital. And Megan, who has seen many births, is probably thinking, let's keep you here a little bit longer, just to keep you relaxed and comfortable in this safe environment here. And so she had said, do you want to try taking a bath? And so I thought, okay, that'll be something nice to try before we go to the hospital. And literally, as I was walking to the kitchen to fill up my water bottle, like the contractions intensified so much. I didn't really make note of it, but I had a contraction in the kitchen, and Megan kind of made eye contact with Cody and was like, we need to go. we need to get to the hospital. And so very quickly went from like, yeah, we're going to stay here for a while, take a bath, to we're leaving right now. And I don't remember saying anything, but I must have said something about like feeling nauseous. And so then immediately there was a scramble of like, do we have a bucket to take in the car with us? And, thankfully didn't need that. That was good. But yeah, it was just pretty wild walking out to the car. And I remember it felt really nice. It was cold in December in Wisconsin, and just being outside and feeling that cold air was like, oh, this feels really nice. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And so I sat in the backseat of the car and I was listening to some Christian hypnobirthing tracks that I've been using throughout pregnancy as well.
Nice.
And that was super helpful, I think, to just close my eyes, put that in. I couldn't hear anything. I couldn't see anything. And that continued to help me just stay focused and be really just aware of what was happening in my body. I do remember feeling like the drive was very frantic. Like I feel like I could feel my husband's stress through just how he was driving or making and we're getting to the hospital. And so, yeah, I just tried to stay as focused as I could on breathing. And I remember like pushing on the headrest in the car, just really going through those contractions in the car was not very comfortable because I had been just moving through every single contraction pretty much the whole time and bending over. So being in a car was definitely not very comfortable, but thankfully only a 15-minute drive or so to the hospital. So it didn't have to endure it very long.
That's not bad. Yeah, no, that's not bad. I mean, people like give birth in the car, and can you imagine that? It's like you're like, it's so uncomfortable to labor in the car. Like imagine actually like pushing out a baby.
Yeah. Cody's mom, I think for multiple births had like a 45-minute drive to the hospital. And I'm like, you're amazing. Crazy. So once we got to the hospital, I remember having contractions, like waiting for the elevator and outside waiting to be buzzed into the labor and delivery floor. And of course, they want to see you in triage first and, do some monitoring before they get you into your room. And quite honestly, that was one of the worst parts of my labor was just waiting. And they wanted to get, I think it was 20 minutes of the baby's heartbeat before they would put me on to be monitored intermittently. And something was going on with that monitor. So we learned afterwards that it was like, that it was broken. And so literally I'm having these contractions in triage, like bent over bed or a chair or whatnot. And they're like trying to place these monitors on my belly and constantly moving them and constantly pushing them. And there was like this belly band that they put on me that was tight and they could not get it to work. Like they would get a few seconds and then it would just go away and then they'd have to try and move it somewhere else. And I had a very high need to just continue to be moving. And thankfully, I didn't feel any need to, appease them. I was like, I'm going to do what I need to do and you can figure it out. So they're like walking around with me and
that's how it should be.
Bending over with me. And eventually, it was probably 20 to 30 minutes that we were in that room and they still hadn't gotten this consistent monitoring. And the main nurse who was helping us out said, I've been a labor and delivery nurse for 40 years. There's no way this isn't labor. We're getting you into your room. I'm like, okay, thank you. So during that short walk down the hall, I had another like wave of nausea. Definitely thought I was going to throw up, but I didn't. So I didn't end up throwing up at all during labor, but felt that nausea for sure. And then we got into our labor and delivery room and I started to use a birthing ball over the bed. I think one of the nurses or our midwife suggested a certain position to labor in that might be helpful. And so I was kind of just leaning over the bed with the birth ball, and the midwife who was going to do the delivery, she came in and introduced herself. And I think it was probably about an hour after I'd been at the hospital that she checked to see how dilated I was. And she said I was 7 centimeters dilated, which like I was shocked. I definitely had thought, I'm going to be 4 or 5 centimeters. There's no way. And so to hear 7, I was like, okay, let's go. Let's do this.
Great. Yeah.
And so pretty soon after that check, I had asked to use the tub. And so the hospital that we gave birth at, they had these whirlpool tubs in every room. And so, yeah, they started filling that. And pretty quickly, I was able to get into the tub. And that was where I spent the majority of my time laboring. And I have always just loved being in the water. It's very relaxing for me. And so I was really able to rest between contractions for the majority of my labor too, just at home and at the hospital, just taking those few brief minutes between contractions to breathe easy and just kind of close my eyes in the tub. That was so nice. I think probably anyone who's used a tub during labor can tell you, it just helps so much and helps you to relax. And so it was great too, because the birth team really gave us space to do what we needed to do. And so it was me in the tub and my husband kneeling next to the tub. All the lights were off. The door was almost all the way closed, and everybody else just stayed in a room and kind of let us do what we needed to do and checked in on us a couple of times. But yeah, it was amazing. And we had the positive affirmations from the Christian hypnobirthing playing throughout it, and been listening to those all throughout my pregnancy as well. So I think it just really helped me to stay in tune and focused and calm, because it was something that was very familiar to me. And so, yeah, I was really able to relax between those contractions, like I said. And then during contractions, I still had to be like bent over. So I would kind of lay down in the tub. And then once a contraction was coming, I would sit up and bend over or move. And my husband was just encouraging the whole time and kind of just giving me like light touches on my arms. And that helped me a lot as well. And so I know probably about after an hour, I did end up having to use the bathroom. So I got out of the tub and used the bathroom. And I remember the contractions on the toilet were horrible. Like they just were way worse than they were in the tub. And so I had a couple of those contractions, and probably my vocalization started to change a little bit. And I remember at that point, the midwife had said, we could break your waters if you want to kind of start things progressing a little bit faster. And at that point, I still had energy. I still felt really good and really confident. And so after talking with Megan, our doula, and Cody, we had said, let's just let things progress a little bit more and just see what happens. And so I got back into the tub, and pretty quickly then after that, I think I started to hit transition. So the contractions went from just like that stomach tightening pain to like, it felt like my body was doing something without my will, and it felt, like that moment before you throw up where your body just kind of like surges. And so those were really challenging contractions. And the midwife said, I think we're reaching a point where we can get things going a little bit faster. Why don't you do some more contractions over the toilet? Our doula said you could do some contractions squatting. And so I think at that point, I realized like, okay, this is where things are going to start getting serious. And I just have to continue to power through and do this so that we can meet our baby. So yeah, the contractions on the toilet and the contractions squatting, definitely things were getting worse. She was moving down. It was much more painful. I could tell before, I was just kind of doing like soft breathing during contractions and just like really focusing on my breath. And after that transition, it was like low groans and, some more wild sounds. And so I could tell, things were progressing. And there were a couple funny moments that happened that I just think are fun to mention. And so before, when I was in the tub, there were all these buttons that like controlled the jets and everything. And as I was like leaning over for a contraction, Cody like accidentally hit them. And so like during a contraction, all the jets went on and he was so flustered. He was like, oh my gosh, what do I push? And I'm just like there leaning, like groaning through a contraction, and like these jets are going crazy and water's going everywhere. And then the other thing was that, as Cody was encouraging me throughout the contractions, I think, he's witnessing me and all of this pain and trying to be encouraging and not really knowing what to say. And eventually he just started saying, perfect, perfect over and over. And it reminded me of this memory when we were engagement ring shopping. We ended up going to this jeweler and having this like nice but sort of creepy person help us out, who like after every time I put on a ring, she just would whisper, gorgeous, gorgeous. It like linked in my mind, and I told him, you need to stop saying perfect, perfect, because it's reminding me of this woman.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But that is so like, that's such a cool memory though, you know, like just to have that together.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Yep. Oh. All right. The sound of that heartbeat means it's time for this week's segment of Birth It Up, Babies. This one says, hi, I just wanted to send a message and tell you how helpful your course was for me. I took your natural birth course, and even though my birth plan didn't go as planned, I was still able to get through it easier because of it. Just having the knowledge and tools about how everything works was so helpful and definitely brought my anxiety levels down. I labored at home for about 7 hours and I was handling it like a freaking champ, and I'm so proud of it all. Everything I learned helped so much. I did have to get induced after my contractions suddenly stopped, and I got an epidural because I just couldn't get through it with my lack of sleep and Pitocin. Very understandable. But all in all, I felt less scared and more prepared. So thank you. Oh, so sweet. If you want to have an even better birth, just like this mama, head on over to mommylabornurse.com/courses to learn more about our 3 online on-demand birth classes.
So it's nice that like, even throughout the most challenging parts of labor, I do feel like I was able to still be myself and still, process these thoughts and laugh and rest. And so, that was a really beautiful thing that I didn't know what it would look like beforehand. You just really aren't sure. And I didn't even know if I would want Cody to touch me during labor, and it ended up that was one of the most helpful things, was having him by me, just like the soft touches during contractions. There's so much that you can't know until you're actually in the experience. And so we had kind of prepared for every experience. I was like, I'm sorry if I don't want you near me. I still love you, but like I might need you near me. Yeah. So
I'm glad you said that, because that's what I talk about in the courses too, is like, I want you guys to learn about counterpressure, learn that you can say birth affirmations and learn this, but know that when it's game day, it's just kind of a toss-up.
Exactly. Another funny thing too is like I had an entire bag full of things that I thought I would use during labor. We had like string lights, we had essential oils, I had my affirmation cards, I had a sound machine. I can't even remember. There was everything imaginable. And I think the only thing that I used was at home, and it was a comb, and I probably used it for 10 minutes, And so very glad that I had them all prepared.
But, there you go.
Didn't know that I wouldn't need to use any of them. Going back to her birth, after I did those contractions on the toilet and contraction squatting, I could tell things are getting there. Let's move back into the main room. And I think I really just went with whatever my body needed. I don't remember anyone telling me how to be, how to position myself or what. I think I just went with what felt good. And thankfully we had a birth team that really wanted to honor that. And so I eventually was kind of draped over the edge or back of the bed. So I was like facing the back of the bed and it was propped up. So my back was to everyone in the room. And I was just kind of put my head down between contractions and was very focused. And this was definitely the point where I started to kind of just block out everything else. It was just, I don't think I even opened my eyes ever during those last few contractions. And during that point, then the midwife said, we're going to check you again. I was 9 centimeters. She said, what do you think about breaking your waters now? And we had a short conversation and I said, yep, let's go for it. And so pretty much she broke the waters. And I think right after that was like, okay, we're ready. Let's start pushing.
Let's push.
I just remember how intense things were. My contractions that whole time at the hospital were coming like every 2 minutes. And so it just was
Yeah.
like pretty constant. During that point, I definitely was not able to rest as much between contractions. It felt more just like an entire string of
Yeah.
pain or, intense effort. And so yeah, the midwife suggested doing contractions and pushing in more of like a lunge position so that I could stay facing the back of the bed. I just would raise one leg during a contraction into kind of a kneeling lunge. And that's when I started to push then. And I remember the midwife was kind of trying to coach me through the pushing, and I was helpful to have someone to tell me what to do because, you've never done this before. And so you're kind of like, what, what should be going on?
What do I do? Yeah.
But I also remember it being difficult because she was wanting me to push multiple times during contractions. And I think I only had enough to push, like make one big push per contraction. And so I remember like being off, like she would say push and then I would push like 30 seconds later. And then she would say push again. And I was still pushing. Like it was just a little off. And so that was one moment that I felt a little jumbled. I was trying to just be in tune with my own body, but then also listen to her because she's seeing what's happening. And yeah, so that was a little challenging. And something I didn't expect either was, obviously the sensation of pushing and what it feels like and what's going on. And I thought that I would be able to tell, oh, this is her head coming out or whatever. And to me, I was like, this feels like a bag of like elbows just jabbing everywhere. And I was trying to find a way to explain it to some of my friends who haven't had babies before. And I was like, a snake bite, like when someone takes your arm and like twists the skin, I was like, that, but like 1,000 times worse in your vagina.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. And so it felt like a combination of that, just like the elbows and bones, like poking everywhere. And then that snake bite sensation. And yeah, I remember at that point, I was like, okay, I need to get this baby out. Like this is starting to feel like more than I can handle. And up until pushing, my breathing, I was able to keep that really consistent and calm, even throughout like the low groaning and all of that. But when I started pushing, I remember between contractions, my breath would just be like, like I was starting to kind of have that panicky feeling. Yeah. And thankfully our doula, she was standing at the front of the bed, so facing me. And she was able to just remind me, like low, like calm, rest, calm, like slow down your breathing. And that was so helpful because I think I would have stayed in that state of panic had she not been there to remind me to try my best to calm down between those pushes. And so, yeah, I remember that was obviously the most intense part and pushing and everything. But at the same time, I don't remember it feeling like it took a very long time. I don't remember how many pushes I did or, how many contractions it took. Afterwards, they said it was less than an hour that I pushed for, which was awesome. But to me, that's great. It really didn't feel that long at all. Even just being at the hospital, I was like, maybe a couple hours have gone by. I don't know, So that was really a blessing that I felt like I was able to just stay so in the zone and just honor what my body needed to do. Present, that I didn't even feel at any point like things were taking a very long time.
That's great.
And so after that less than an hour of pushing, she was born and they passed her underneath me since I was in that lunge position. And so that was like really wild too. And she's like covered in all this blood and everything. And they quickly like wiped her off and I switched to laying down on my back, and Cody was like really emotional at my side. I didn't know if I would start crying, and I didn't cry. I mostly felt just like so empowered and so in awe of like this,
like on top of the world.
I did this and this is incredible and can't believe this just happened. And he's crying next to me because, he just witnessed me go through so much pain, and we had good conversations about that afterwards, just how hard that is to see, the person that you love so much go through so much pain. But yeah, we were just so excited to see her, and she was super, super alert right away. Her eyes were open the whole time, and she started nursing really quickly too. And yeah, the hospital that we gave birth at are very hands off, like for that first hour, which was great. So they kind of just like cleaned her up a little bit. But then for the majority of that hour, she was just on me, which was amazing. I do feel that once I flipped over and she was placed on me, after that like brief moment of Cody and I like, oh my gosh, this just happened. This is amazing. My eyes were kind of open to the rest of the room, and it felt like a
Mhm.
swarm of people just around me all of a sudden.
Ah,
And because I was
yeah.
so in the zone and so focused throughout the whole labor, I think I just tuned out anyone else. Like I knew that the midwife was there. I knew my husband was there. I knew our doula was there, but anyone else, didn't even really pay attention to them whatsoever.
Mhm.
And so that was overwhelming at first to just, it's like, okay, our daughter has just been past me. Who is she? Let's look at her. And then everyone's
Mhm.
around you, and they're starting to do the fundal rubs, they're placing an IV, they're doing all these things that need to happen. But at the same time, it felt like a lot. It is a lot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It is a lot. Yeah.
And so the first fundal rubs I remember were really, really terrible. And then I did end up
Yeah.
having to get some stitches. Afterwards, our doula explained that she kind of felt like they rushed the delivery of the placenta, which I was bummed about. I definitely felt like it happened really quickly. I didn't know what was happening down there, right? Like, so it just
Yeah.
was like, oh, she told me to push. So I pushed.
Push.
And
Yeah.
so apparently what had happened, was not everything came out. So they're like reaching in for some clots and things like that.
Mm.
And that was very painful. So it was like this weird,
Oh, it's horrible.
this weird moment where you're just so elated, so empowered. You're seeing your baby for the first time, but then also this really painful thing is still happening to you. And it
Yeah.
took a while longer. Like our doula said, that it took much longer than any other birth experience that she's had for them to like stitch me up and clean
Mm.
me up and everything. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I just remember like holding her and also like still having to do like really deep breathing because I was in a lot of
Yeah.
pain from that stitching. I only had
Yeah.
a few tears, and they were all internal. So I didn't have any like on the perineum. So that was good. But yeah, it just was kind of like, I just want to be with our daughter. Like everybody leave, stop touching
Yeah.
me. I
Yeah.
just want to be with her and like have a moment of peace.
Yeah.
And so when all of that was finally over, it was just this moment of calm and peace. And, like,
Like, oh, I
okay,
can finally
yeah.
like, yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, like I said, Lorelai was super alert right after she was born and started to nurse, and that was really special. And I think the only other thing that was like pretty noticeable was that kind of at transition, I had started to experience like really intense shakes, and those stayed for like an hour or two
Yes.
after birth. And I remember Cody saying like, I thought, something was totally wrong, but it was just, I could not
Hmm.
stop shaking.
Yeah, it's a weird thing that happens. And I'm glad you said it was happening afterwards too, because that's something that happens during transition. Sometimes it happens if you get an epidural, you have kind of, it's from the epidural as well, but it's just from labor. But yeah, it's like that shift, that huge hormonal shift that you just had that kind of like,
Yeah.
like makes you
Mhm.
shake. And you're like, I'm not
Right.
cold. I can't stop
Exactly.
shaking.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, crazy. Well, this was
Mhm.
fabulous. I mean, I've had
Oh,
goosebumps like since you started
that's so
talking.
sweet.
Like, this was just so
Yeah.
great to hear you talk about this because I feel like it was such, despite the last bit
Hmm.
of it with the discomfort with the
Right.
placenta, it was such an incredible, empowering
Mhm.
experience. And I did want to ask you before we wrap up, I know you said that you used your
Yeah.
Christian positive birth affirmations.
Hmm.
You said you stayed active with expecting and
Hmm.
empowered. Anything else that you did to prepare? And also to moms who are
Yeah.
listening, if there was like one or two things you could say, because
Hmm.
I know everyone's listening and they're like,
Yeah.
what can I do? I want this. I want
Right.
this. What advice
I
would you
know.
give?
Yeah. I feel like it's so tricky because even for me thinking about having another baby, I'm like, but what if it doesn't go the same way? like I feel like because we
Yes,
had
very good
such
point.
a beautiful experience, both with like the end of my pregnancy and with her birth. Yeah. I think there is this line that we walk where it's like, I want to be as prepared as possible. I know that I can do
Yep.
this and I'm going to trust that I can do it, but also be prepared for things to go a little bit differently if they needed to. And so, yeah, that's
Mhm.
really challenging. But there were things that I did that I know for sure helped me. And the Christian hypnobirthing was huge. I think even if you aren't a
Yeah.
Christian, the positive affirmation track, I listen to that
Yeah.
like almost every single day because it just is reassuring of that you
Yeah.
can do it. I think we're often just presented with all of the kind of hard parts of pregnancy and labor, and to remind ourselves, like, this is how women have been giving birth, for centuries, and they all did it, and we can do it. And that doesn't mean you have to do it that way, right? Even if you know going into it that you want to have an epidural, it's still going to be hard. So to encourage yourself and to tell yourself that you can do it, and have those common phrases to go back on. Like, we still even use, one of the phrases was like, my mind is at ease, my body is at ease. And we use that after she was born, because there's so much anxiety and stress that comes after baby is born. But to just have that reminder of like, relax your body and your mind is going to follow. Yep. So doing that definitely helped me. And they have some exercises too with breathing so that you can really focus on that breathing. And I think that was huge. But yeah, I would say that mindset of I can do this was the most empowering thing. So following accounts and seeing positive birth stories of other people having natural births, if that's what you want, and just listening to birth stories. I listened to a lot of the birth stories on your podcast. And then there's another podcast I can't remember the name of.
The Birth Hour, maybe?
Yes. Yeah. All birth stories. And I kind of made the decision for myself to, I think I maybe listened to 2 or 3 of births with an epidural or like an induction, but then it was like the rest are going to be natural, because I just really felt that I wanted to focus mostly on that. So if you're someone who needs to prepare for the worst, and like needs to hear those stories to be assured that whatever happens, it's going to be okay, you can do that. But for me, it felt better to just listen to more of the stories that aligned with what I desired. And then I think that helped me to stay in that lane and stay really focused, like, yep, I can do this and it is possible. So other than that, staying active, I think expecting and empowered helped immensely. There wasn't ever a point during labor that I felt I am exhausted, I cannot do this anymore. It doesn't mean that it wasn't hard, but I think all of those specific exercises that they have curated, to help you do exactly what you need to do during labor, that was super, super helpful to have. And then having our doula, she helped us prep, beforehand, gave us like really good questions to ask. Your course that we went through was amazing in helping us just understand, what's actually going to happen when this all goes down, what to expect with the hospital. Another thing I thought of too is like how common it is for women during pregnancy to have these checkups at the hospital where it's basically like, okay, we're going to listen to baby's heartbeat and like, do you have any questions? Okay, bye. Yeah. It's sad, but if you aren't doing the research or you aren't preparing yourself, you don't know what questions to ask. And so
you don't know.
And so it isn't fair that it's our responsibility, but it kind of is to have those questions ready to think about, how do you want your birth to go? Do you want to be hooked up to a monitor your entire birth or your entire labor? Or do you want to be able to move? What resources does your hospital have to help you cope with pain? Asking those questions and being really proactive. That was something that I did at every single appointment. I remember my midwife is like, okay, I know you have questions, like get out your notebook and let's go through your questions. And so I know that you can just search, and you give examples too in your podcast and your course about what you can be asking at those appointments, just to prepare. And then I would say conversations as well with your birth partner, whoever that's going to be, who's going to be with you. And like we mentioned before, kind of planning for any scenario and saying, I love you. This might be what happens. This might be what happens. What can we do to prepare ourselves for that?
Oh, I love it. Round of applause. Love it. Great answers. I love it. Well, Andrea, this was fabulous. Do you want to share your social media or any way that people can connect with you? Maybe if they want to kind of follow along.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram. My name is andrea.marie.gosser. So I can send that to you so it's all spelled correctly.
I will. Yes. And we'll put it in the show notes for people who, if you want to click on it, you can go right to your Instagram and follow you. Awesome.
Perfect.
This was a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here with me today and sharing your story.
Thank you so much for having me.
Big thanks to Andrea for coming on and sharing her birth story. Oh, wasn't that just the best? I can't say that any birth story is better than any other one, right? It wasn't the best, but there is just something about a good old positive birth story. I just love it. So next week on the Mommy Labor Nurse podcast, we are going to be talking about inductions, I think. Hold on. Let me check my schedule in a sauna and see. Yeah, we are going to be talking about inductions. We're going to be talking about the do's and don'ts before you get induced. Okay. So specifically, kind of beforehand, it's going to be just, a solo episode. So I'll just be on here kind of talking to you guys. So stay tuned and I'll see you guys next week. Already feeling a little more confident about pregnancy, birth, and newborn life? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you can continue to erase the unknowns and never miss an episode. And if you're looking for even more, Instagram is definitely where I hang out the most. Come join our community of more than 500,000 moms for birth education, tips, and solidarity. You can find me at mommy.labornurse. Check out today's show notes and a searchable library of every Mommy Labor Nurse podcast episode at mommylabornurse.com/podcast. And while you're there, be sure to head to the blog to learn about our online birth classes too. See you next week. And remember, you can have an even better birth no matter how you deliver.